sometimes struggle to get up in the morning or wind down for bed at night? I used to find it so difficult. I woke up with no sense of positivity and brightness. I was void of motivation and spirit. This changed completely when I started waking up with a Lumi body clock. These incredible devices mimic the light and colour of a real sunrise and sunset, transforming the experience of waking up and going to sleep completely. Rather than being suddenly woken up with an alarm clock, the Lumi body clock will wake you up gradually with a natural sunrise. The Lumi body clock has been shown to improve the quality of sleep and awakening and to boost mood and productivity in clinical trials. You can personalise your sunrise and sunset from 15 to 90 minutes with their clinically tested unique natural light and more than 20 sleep and wake sounds. We all deserve to sleep well and to wake up feeling fresh. So if you're finding this a challenge and you want to try a new approach, go to lumi.com.
Well, artists I remember loving. I mean, I got into music in the first place. I just used to love singing. So when I was very young, I used to sing around the house all the time, and my mother sent me off and made me join the school choir and the church choir just to get me out, because I just made so much noise at home. Artists that influenced me when I was younger. I mean, I guess when I was very young, I kind of got into music. It was sort of like rock pop. It was Slade and Sweet and people like that I loved, that were a little kind of had an edge to them, but were very melodic. So if you see what I mean. So Slade and Sweet were kind of like, they weren't really rock bands, they were rock pop bands, and they wrote pop music, but with an edge. So it was kind of different.
Would those bands be glam rock? Would that be?
I guess I mean, Sweet certainly were. I guess Slade were as well. Yeah, I guess it was kind of glam rock. I mean, T-Rex was another one. So yeah, I guess it was that kind of edgier, big front men, with Noddy Holder, Brian Connolly, Mark Bolan. I mean, yeah,
those records sound great, and like kind of nothing else has come out in recent years sounding anything like that I can think of. I mean,
because they were like big pop songs, but they were done with these loud guitars, and it was a joy to listen to.
And it's interesting what you said there about melody, because I mean, as far as I can tell, as far as I'm concerned, when I'm listening to it, one of the amazing things about Tears for Fears records is the melody, but there are many other things I'd like to explore on that front. Sticking with your earlier years though, when did you start playing bass guitar?
Well, that was later. Initially, when we were 13, 14 years old, Roland heard me, we met through a mutual friend, and he heard me singing a Blue Oyster Cult song, actually, another band that I kind of grew up with, which is a little abstract, called The Last Days of May, and I was singing along loudly in my bedroom to it, and he had formed this band at school and asked me whether I'd be interested in singing for them. So I did. So initially I was actually just the singer in the band. And that didn't last that long, but we remained friends. And I think when we were 16, 17, he'd formed this band called Graduate, and they hated the bass player, or he hated the bass player, should I say. So they fired him, and he said, why don't you learn bass so then I can get you in the band, and then we could be, he wanted someone who thought the same as him, who was more in line with his way of thinking. So I actually learned the bass when I was 16 years old, taught myself.
Wow, is that quite late on, would you say?
Yeah, that's very late on. Yeah, I mean, but guitar's an interesting thing, because I think you either have an affinity with it or you don't. And, I know people that have been playing guitar for, 20, 30 years that still can't play guitar. So it's something you kind of have or you don't. It's a bit like singing. Some people can sing in tune, some people can't hold a tune to save their lives. It's either in you or it isn't.
When did you realize that you were a good singer?
I always liked the sound of my own voice. It's like any good frontman. I don't know. I mean, I think I guess once we started recording, I guess, you realize you have, and it's not a question of being a good singer, it's a question of having a distinctive voice. I think that is the biggest strength, because there could be some singers that are technically far better than you, and there are thousands that are far better than me, but there's only one that sounds like me. So it's that kind of thing. If you have a distinctive voice, there's nothing more powerful than that if you're going to be an artist. You know, if someone can hear something and say that's such and such singing, that's a big thing.
Yeah. Did that happen early on for you, in the sense of, did people hear you sing and say you kind of sound like no one else? Because it's not only that with Tears for Fears, it's like your voice, you almost immediately know who's singing, but then it's also your sound. Tears for Fears are kind of like one of those bands where it's like its own genre. Like you turn it on. I know there are some similarities that and you'll have influences and stuff, but when did you realize that vocally?
I don't think it's ever anything we've ever consciously thought about. You know, it's something we've come to realize over the years. You know, it's one of those things, in retrospect, you realize what the strength is that you have or had. You know, and what's unique about Tears for Fears also is that there's two of us singing. You know, and the sound of both of us singing at the same time is a unique sound also. I mean, pretty much most hits, most songs we have, certainly, yeah, I would say the large percentage of songs we have on a chorus of a song is actually always both of us. So that has its own sound also.
Yeah, that's very true. And of course, with Tears for Fears, for those people, you know, who are fans of your music but perhaps don't know the backstory, how did you meet Roland? Because it's very unique to kind of be this band, this huge band, Tears for Fears, but in fact it's, you know, it's two people. Would you describe yourselves as a duo?
Well, we have been. You know, when we started, we were called a synth duo, which, you know, because we used synthesizers and electronic music, because they had just really come in at that point in time, and certainly come into fashion. But it was always comical to us because we're both guitar players. So, you know, being called a synth duo when neither of us, even though in the studio we did play, you know, we would play synthesizers, but neither of us are born keyboard players at all. So that always amused us. But yeah, I mean, we met when we were 13, 14 years old, as I say, through a mutual friend. It was someone I knew who was at Roland's school. We were at different schools in Bath in England. There were two they were grammar schools the first year we were there, then they became comprehensive schools. Well, I think we were the last year ever to take the 11 plus, which was this exam way back when that was kind of hideous and separated you off to people who passed it, people who failed it. And the people who passed it went to a grammar school. So we were the last year to do that. But there were two big comprehensive schools, and I was at one and Roland was at the other one. So we met through this mutual friend who introduced us, and we kind of hit it off musically. And also we have very similar backgrounds. We grew up on council estates, mine in Bath. Roland actually grew up in Lee Park, which is this big council estate outside of Portsmouth. And we're the middle of three sons, brought up primarily by our mothers, absent fathers. So we had a lot in common. So that's sort of what drew us together, I think.
And when did you decide, was there a moment that you decided, you know, we're going to go for it, we're going to try and become, you know, massive stars and have this amazing career? Or was it just, did it evolve more organically than that?
I think it evolved organically, although, you know, that's always a dream. And it's not that I don't think we've ever, and you know, I can back this up by the length of time it takes us to make records. We were never looking for stardom as such. You know, we were never looking to be famous particularly. We wanted to make a living doing something we enjoyed doing. So in that sense, you know, the prime sort of driver for us initially was to get a record deal, so that we could actually have income and we could not have to sign on the dole every week, which we were doing at that point in time. So when we were 17, late in our 17th year, we were discovered by this publisher called Tony Hatch, who was quite well known in England because he used to have the original version of American Idol, which was, I can't remember, New Faces, I think it was called. So Tony Hatch was the Simon Cowell of his time. He was the mean one on the panel, and he had a publishing company, and he heard our music and signed us to a publishing deal, and then he got us signed to a record deal when we were 18.
Did you think at that stage, like, there's no way I want to go back to doing anything at all, music is it for the rest of my life? Or was that not the turning point in that sense? But did you know much earlier on when you were younger that you wanted to be involved with music for the rest of your life?
Well, I think if you're given a choice in any profession or any artistic endeavor, if you can make a living from doing it because it's something you're passionate about and you enjoy doing, then that's the perfect scenario. I mean, it's only later, weirdly, you discover that there are many downsides to being able to make a living out of music. And hence our quiet periods and me leaving for a long period of time and disappearing. But yeah, I mean, our sole driving force was to make music, and to be able to continue to make music, we had to make a living from that music. So in that sense, yes, we were desperate to get a record deal, and we would like to keep doing this. So hopefully, because unless you have some element of success, they're not going to renew your record deal, or you're not going to be signed again. So with that, success has to come, or some level of success, otherwise you can't continue to do it.
During the periods where you weren't, Tears for Fears, where you weren't involved in music, what did you spend your time doing?
Strangely, music. but in a different level. I mean, what happened was I found it hard to deal with the level of fame we achieved. Myself and Roland weren't really getting on. And I had met my, now wife, we've been together for 34 years now, but in New York, even though she's actually English, well, Welsh to be precise. So I met her in New York and was enjoying going to New York a lot. And what I loved about New York was you could just disappear. No one really cared who you were. If you're well known in New York, at my level of success, I'm like a C celebrity, C-list celebrity at the most. Oh. But it's New York, So and also there, New Yorkers just don't stop you and talk to you. They wouldn't do that. They respect your privacy. They don't really care that much. They're too busy with their own lives. So it's a great place to go and disappear. And I've been there for a while, and I knew I didn't want to play and be at the forefront of anything at that point in time. I didn't think it was good for me and particularly healthy, but my main passion was still music. So I actually hosted an MTV show for a while, and I had this, which I enjoyed the most, was I had this syndicated college radio show, which had bands that were big on college radio come into a studio, play live, and I would interview them and talk to them. So it was that kind of renewed my passion, because they were all primarily younger musicians, very college based. And it reminded me of why I kind of did this in the first place. And I think that was the driving force behind me probably starting again. And that's when I met this guy, Charlton Pettus, who works with Tears for Fears now in New York, and he became a friend, and we started writing together. So then I kind of got the bug again, and I formed this band with him and a few friends in New York, and we used to play these little clubs in New York and just enjoy ourselves. So then the sort of passion came back because I was doing it for the right reason. And
what was it like kind of playing clubs? Because you've just announced a big kind of Tears for Fears tour, and the venues are, as you're used to, they're enormous arenas. So what was it like playing clubs?
It was really fun. It was fantastic. I mean, we, because it was just kind of like a bunch of friends. I mean, Charlton still plays guitar with Tears live. Doug Petty from my band back then, and we're talking now, 25 years ago in New York. Doug Petty, the keyboard player from my band back then, who's now in LA, plays keyboards for Tears for Fears now. So two of those people that I met still are with me today in the Tears for Fears band. And there's very much a cooperative in New York, which is very different to England. And we had this recording place in Dumbo, which is an area of Brooklyn down under the Manhattan Bridge overpass. Everything has a meaning in the names of New York. And it was this old industrial warehouse, and the studio was in the basement, but there were about 10 studios in the basement, all owned by other musicians or rented by other musicians. So we would kind of go between, like if you wanted some weird guitar on something, there was this guy, Kenny, who we knew from another band, Kenny Siegel, and he would come in and play guitar for us. So it was this sort of interesting musical cooperative that was amazing to be a part of.
What made you want to kind of go back to Tears for Fears and start like making a new album, making the tipping point?
Well, initially it was now 20 years ago, but myself and Roland started talking together again, and we sort of discussed whether it might be worth working together again or not. And we kind of went about it slowly. So what happened was I had to go back to England to visit my family, who lived in Bath. Roland still lived in Bath. And my family, my two brothers still lived there, and my mother at that point in time while she was still alive. So I was back there visiting them, and we went out to dinner. And it seemed that there was so much water under the bridge, and we changed, both of us, quite a bit. That all those sort of arguments we had 10 years previous sort of didn't matter that much anymore. So we started working together, and initially it was okay. And then we had this song called Closest Thing to Heaven that came out of it, and we really liked it. And then we both kind of were like, there is a certain sound we have when we work together that's very different than what we do when we're on our own. It's very different to the stuff Roland was doing as Tears for Fears without me. It's very different from the band I had in New York. So we kind of understood then, finally, that there was something kind of interesting that happened between us. So we ended up making this album called Everybody Loves a Happy Ending, and that was supposed to be our kind of goodbye. We got back together, isn't it nice? And we're friends again. But then the touring side kind of took off, and
so that was 2000. That was 2004, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and then the touring side took off, and people were starting to realize that we were a really good live band. So we ended up sort of touring every year for not long periods of time, for maybe a couple of months. And it was making us a very good living without us really having to do a tremendous amount. And playing live with the band we have now is just incredibly enjoyable. So we were just enjoying ourselves primarily.
When did the touring side take off? And had you been trying to get the touring side to take off before, and it suddenly took off? It doesn't sound like that. It sounds like it kind of happened quite naturally.
Yeah, it happened quite naturally. I think that we started to sort of do a little bit here and there, and people would come see us. And I think that the amount of time we'd spent away, people didn't realize that we were actually a good live band, because I guess people see just two people. It's myself and Roland, and when you see a picture of a band, that's not a picture you perceive to be a very like a big live band. But there are other people behind us. So we're a 6-piece band live, and five, six counting myself now. The more we did it, we only started, be playing smaller venues, and then bigger, and then bigger, and then bigger, until, I guess it's 3 years ago now, we play at the O2 in London and sell it out. So it's one of these things that it's built up over the years.
And in the 80s or early 90s, would you be playing venues like the size that you are now, or is this like the kind of the biggest size have ever been?
We would be, yeah. We would be in, after Songs from the Big Chair, certainly we were playing those size venues, definitely in America. It was or was an arena tour. But we're back playing those size venues now. So the same kind of size we were at the height of our fame as the other venues we're playing now. I mean, our songs from the big chair we actually are. Seeds of Love, I guess, was the last album I did then. And that era of Tears for Fears, we played the Forum in LA, was our biggest show. This tour, we're playing the Forum in LA.
I mean, it's incredible. And it must be really exciting after everything that, you know, has been going on in the world. But in terms of, you know, touring every year and building up this kind of, you know, new lease of life, playing live, how come you didn't make a new record? Was it just not something that either of you thought about?
Yeah, it was not anything we particularly thought about, because it was a sort of slow process building up the live work. But also we were busy, you know, the live work was enabling us to be busy doing the things that were important, which was bringing up our children. So the joy of only having to play a couple of months a year and earn a very good living from it enabled us to spend the other 10 months with our family. And that was incredibly important to both of us. So yeah, we had the best of both worlds, basically. So we didn't really think about it that much. And then it got to a point, I'm guessing about six years or so ago, when we were finishing a tour and we were both sort of like, okay, well, this is not that it wasn't getting boring, but we have a finite amount of material. So, you know, there's so many years where you can change up the set, do different things, but because you have a finite amount of material, there's only so much you can change. And we thought, you know, it was a time for us we would like to add new songs to a live show. So we started then thinking about the process of, well, do we just go right and then just add them to live show, or should we make a record? And for us, I think making an actual album is the first step, because that's how we create the sort of production of a song. Just playing live, we can't do that. We can't add all the layers slowly. And we're not the quickest workers in the world, so I think it would have taken us forever to try and do it just as a live band.
This episode of the Greatest Music of All Time podcast is brought to you by St. Aubin Retail and Distribution. St. Aubin Retail and Distribution is an independent retailer offering high-quality products direct to consumer at great prices, from home and furniture to clothing and accessories to electronics and entertainment. Whether you're looking for a new MacBook, a face mask, an Amazon Echo Assistant, a camera, or even a comfortable mattress for your bed, St. Aubin Retail and Distribution has got you covered, giving you excellent value for money and attentive customer service, no matter what you're looking for. Head to staubinretail.com to browse their range of amazing products.
It's something that we keep coming back to, the fact that you know, kind of take a while when you're creating something. Is that something that you and Roland are both on the same page with? Like, is that something that you both like, you know, kind of taking quite a while over something?
No, I think it's something we both like to not have to do, but we're also both perfectionists in our own ways. So so you've got two people who want to get something kind of perfect, but normally that means perfect in two different ways. Then the fight is to get it to a point where we both really like it. So it's not going to be 100% what I would want. It's not going to be 100% what Roland would want. So otherwise we'd be doing these things ourselves. But we got to get to a point where both of us really like it, and that's what takes time.
There are so many elements that I appreciate and that so many people appreciate in Tears for Fears music, and it sounds incredibly original. So for people who don't know, and myself included, how does the process of writing like one of these songs start? I mean,
it's very sad, the subject matter, but it's Roland's wife passed away 3 years ago, 4 years ago, three or four, I think 3. And he was watching her slowly die, unfortunately. It was a kind of long illness. And it was a song about when do you let them go? Is it when they die, or when it's not the person you knew anymore? So it's this kind of, who's that ghost knocking at my door? You're looking at this person maybe lying in a bed, and it's not the person you know. And that's what the song was basically about. So that was written obviously by Roland, lyrically. But as far as songwriting goes, there's no set rules. You know, everyone can be different. I mean, there's songs on this album that, you know, I've written. I've written with Charlton. I've written just me and Roland in a room. So there's no set rules. That the sort of magic, or what makes it Tears for Fears, happens in the studio normally after a song is written. So we'll write the song, then we get into the process of producing it and turning it into something that we both are happy with.
And in terms of working on something that's so kind of personal and emotional, is that very difficult to collaborate on something where, you know, it's inspired by something that's so difficult to for anyone?
Well, in this case, no, because Caroline was also a friend of mine since she was, you know, since we were 13. So I'd known her that long also. You know, we grew up together, and we'd known each other for you know, the same amount of time as I've known Roland, basically. But I think I met Caroline before Roland. Yeah, I think I did. And so, yeah, I mean, because there's another one about Caroline called Please Be Happy, and I sing that one. So, you know, the other question I was asked on a previous interview was, is that difficult to sing about, you know, this is a song Roland wrote about his wife, but you're singing it? And I'm, well, yeah, because I knew her too. You know, I grew up with her. So it's, no, I mean, I think that, you know, for all our differences as people, and we are quite different, we do share this common bond of music, which both of us are passionate about and tend to be in the same vein. All of our songs are very personal and very, for us, cathartic, I think.
And where did you make this album?
Oh, everywhere. Well, bits and bobs, different places. But I mean, some of it was done in London, parts of it with Sasha Skarbek at his studio in London. I think we started, you know, off the album in Roland's studio in Bath, and we finished all of it in Los Angeles. So basically between England and LA were all the recordings, but mostly, I mean, the last 3 months finishing the album, which is half the album, and tidying up 5 of the tracks to make them more in tune with the half of the album that we just finished, was done in Los Angeles.
And because I remember sort of rumors circulating like back in 2013 or 14 about a new album. So when did work actually begin on this?
Probably back then.
Really?
I mean, yeah. I mean, we kind of started, as I say, in Roland's studio in Bath, the germs of ideas for songs for the album. And whenever Alex Ferguson's last game managing Manchester United was, that's when we started, because I remember that occasion when we were at Roland's house. So that was when we actually started the process of just writing songs for the album, probably not necessarily recording. And then it was, you know, in between touring and, you know, again bringing up our children, that we would do bits and bobs. We had no time schedule for it. I mean, there was no rush. We didn't need to do it. We weren't signed to a record label that we had any commitments to. So we just took our sweet time doing it, really.
And was there anything that because the first thing that occurred to me when listening to The Tipping Point was that it could have been, and I mean this in a good way, that it could have literally been released in, you know, classic era Tears for Fears, classic era, you know, 80s like big hit records that have stood the test of time. It sounded to me as timeless as that, and I'm not pulling your leg, and you might find that annoying because you may have been wanting to sound different to that.
No, quite the opposite. that was the issue we had when we finally sort of got serious about making the record, and we signed on with the management company. His influence on it was that he thought we should be writing with more modern writers, we should be recording with more modern producers, we should make a modern sounding record. So the initial, for like a good 2 years on and off again, only a few weeks at a time, we attempted that. We did all this sort of speed dating, writing and recording and tried to make a modern record. And then by sort of the end of it, I had to sit down with Roland. We had dinner in Bath, and I just said, I don't like it. I just don't think it's honest. I think it's all on one level. It doesn't tell a story. It's all just an attempt at making a modern sounding hit record, and it's not my cup of tea, So I don't want to do this. And at that point, Roland was kind of into it, I think. And so I said, look, if you want to do it, then you go ahead and do it, but it's not for me. And then everything kind of went south a bit because we were touring, and then Roland's wife unfortunately passed away, and he had his own emotional problems around that, which were horrible to have to go through. And after kind of a year of us doing nothing, I think Roland sat down and listened to the record and called me up out of the blue and said, "Do you want to go for lunch?" And so we went for lunch in Los Angeles. And he's like, I don't like it either. And now I'm listening to it. I'm like, it's not us. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's not us, because it's us trying to do something that other people are pushing us to do. And so then we sort of reassessed it and not started from scratch, because half of the songs we liked. So we took the half of the album, the current album, the songs we liked, and reworked them, and then started writing new songs. And we brought in five new songs got written, and then we started finishing the recording. And because we were left to our own devices and no one else was involved in it, it went really quickly, and it ended up sounding like us, which is great. And the biggest compliment we could be given, and we have, people have said the same as you're saying. And we had this listening session in London, and the biggest compliment we had, and this was across the board, was most people came out saying it sounds like a Tears for Fears record. And that that's the biggest compliment we could get. It doesn't sound like us trying to be anything other than who we are.
Yeah. And in terms of trying to make it sound more modern, I mean, I don't really know how much records have sounded more like modern since that time period. Like I don't know whether records can sound any bigger. And so I know that's what kind of modern records are all about. It's all about the bass and kind of, maybe was it trying to get it to be more to the point, or more stripped back and more like pop? Or because
I think,
and that era I haven't heard bigger sounding records since.
No, I mean, I agree with you. I think it's a much bigger sounding record than most things modern. I mean, if I listen to most things modern, this was the case with what we were doing. One, they're too electronic, so but they're very in your face. So everything is over compressed. I don't want to get into the technical side particularly, but everything is so compressed and so bright. So they have this level up here that's really like at you, and then this thumping bass that's normally sub bass that's all the way down here. And in the middle, there's generally nothing. And I find those records horrible to listen to. But those are modern sounding records most of the time. And they are catered to people who listen on a computer laptop, on a laptop. So you don't hear that bigger sound anyway, because the speaker is limited, or earpods, which are tinny. And so they come through on those mediums. But if you listen to them on, which I've done to a lot of modern records on big speakers, they do not live up to the hype because they don't sound that great on big speakers. They tend to sound very empty in the middle.
That's yeah. So it's kind of the sonic element of it.
Yeah, I mean that's just the way we work. I mean I can't listen to records like that particularly because they don't tick all the boxes for me. Someone's not spent a lot of time. They've taken the lowest common denominator to make it sound the loudest.
It's quite a cynical approach to making records. It seems that's quite prevalent. But are there any modern acts, and artists and who really impress you and who you spend time listening to, or are you quite kind of focused on the old, focused on what you're doing?
No. I mean, I listen to quite a bit of music, but I mean, newer. Well, not newer. I mean, because some of them aren't as new anymore. But I mean, I'm a big fan of the 1975. Huge fan of Bon Iver. I mean, the last album he made was just a work of genius, I think. And then, I also like more stripped down stuff like Phoebe Bridgers, which I think is wonderful emotionally. Big fan of Rex Orange County's songwriting. It's I mean, I have a mixture of taste.
Yeah.
Watching Rex Orange County play in Los Angeles and Randy Newman getting up and playing with him was one of the highlights of the last few years.
Yeah, there's a lot of appreciation for Randy Newman among newer artists because he was on the Chance the Rapper record as well. And Rex Orange County writes great songs. So The Tipping Point is out in February. When do you I think it's February the 25th, but I will include it in the show notes.
Exactly. It's February the 25th, which coincidentally is the exact same date that Songs from the Big Chair was released.
Was that a deliberate?
No.
Well, it was coincidentally, so obviously not deliberate.
No.
And when do you start touring America?
We start in America in May, so the middle of May.
And that's where the whole tour starts, right?
Yeah. So the first
UK in summer.
UK is July, but so the first beginning of it is middle of May in the US. So the first, it'll be interesting. I'm looking forward to it because the first week or two we'll be kind of flying by the seat of our pants because it'll be the first time in a while where we're adding new music. Well, first time in God knows how long we've been adding new music and changing the set. So you never know if that's going to work or not. I mean, there's one thing to do something in a rehearsal room where your audience is you and the band, and you may think it works, but until you get to that situation where it's a full audience and that's that kind of immediate transaction between you and an audience, you don't know if it's going to work or not. And it's the first kind of week or so of a tour where you think you have a set that works, and then you go there and something falls flat. And you're like, oh, okay, now we got to think again. So you normally don't get settled until a couple of weeks into the tour. Good news being that by the time we get to England, we'll be settled.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm imagining it will be really exciting adding all these new tunes. And also, when was the last time that you played live?
3 years ago. 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah.
Be amazing to get back out there. It's so good to have live music back. Curt, thank you so much for coming on the Greatest Music of All Time podcast. I've got one final question for you.
Yes, sir.
Which is, if you were hard pressed and you had to give an answer to this, because I know it's quite a difficult question, who would be the greatest musicians of all time to you personally?
The greatest musicians of all time. Well, I mean, Bowie is a given for me. For me, the biggest influences on musically for me were David Bowie and Peter Gabriel, really. I mean, those were my biggest influences growing up. And this is more production-wise. I think I put in Talking Heads there as well. But there are people over the years that you admire. I mean, as I previously mentioned, more modern artists that I admire also. And even like for all his faults, if I listen to a Kanye record, it sounds great. It's a great sounding record. He's a fucking lunatic, but the record sounds great.
True.
But so there are many, But I would go back to the people that I kind of grew up with, because those were the big influences on me. And I think that there was one particular year, and it was when we were sort of forming Tears for Fears. I think it was all around the same year, where David Bowie's Scary Monsters came out. Peter Gabriel's third album came out with the Melted cover, and Remain in Light by Talking Heads came out. That was what set me off onto the path of learning how to produce records.
This episode is brought to you by Pact. Pact specialise in making travel easy for you with the beautifully designed Pact One. This innovative travel bag can be packed with as much as a suitcase, but it carries like a duffel bag. The Pact One is a bag that's been perfected with over 5 years of global travel testing spanning hundreds of thousands of miles. The Pact Coffee Kit provides you with everything you need to make barista quality coffee whilst on the move. It can be used anywhere you have water and electricity, so there will be no more poor quality coffee on your travels. Pact aren't only an amazing brand because of their products, which quite simply make your life better. They ensure fair working conditions for their factory employees and use eco-friendly materials and plastic-free packaging.
You can use the code GREATEST for 15% off the Pact One or the Coffee Kit. Simply head to pactbags.com and use the code upon checkout. Pact, revolutionising your travel experience.